Have you ever watched Congress and thought, they're acting like children? They can't even have a normal conversation. Why can't they just work together? I have a lot. And honestly, sometimes it's hard to watch because what we're seeing doesn't look like problem solving. It looks like arguing, posturing, talking past each other. So the conclusion feels obvious. They just don't want to work together. But what if that's not the full picture? What if the problem isn't just that there's conflict, but how that conflict is being handled? Because here's something we don't talk about very often. Congress is built on disagreement. Different parties, different priorities, different constituencies. Conflict isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. It's democracy in action. So today I want to pause and look at something a little deeper. Because if we want Congress to work, we need to understand what's actually breaking down. This is American Together, which means we're going to pause, pinpoint truth, and then proceed with purposeful forethought. It's easy to say they just need to get along. I've said that too. But that skips a really important question. Do we actually know how to handle disagreement well ourselves? Because Congress is made up of human beings with the same kinds of habits, blind spots, and emotional reactions we all have. Truth check.
From anyone, we stand American together.
So let's start with what most of us naturally assume. We look at Congress and think, they're too divided, too stubborn, too focused on winning. And to be fair, there are moments where that's absolutely true. But here's the underlying belief. If they just cooperated more, things would work. That sounds reasonable, but there's a problem with that idea. Because cooperation isn't always the goal. Representation is. Members of Congress are elected to represent different people with different needs, values, and priorities, which means they are supposed to disagree. If everyone agreed all the time, that wouldn't be unity. That would be a lack of representation. So disagreement itself, that's not the problem. It's expected, it's necessary, which means if things are breaking down, the issue isn't the presence of conflict. It's something else. Because disagreement only helps a democracy work when people know how to move through it productively. When conflict turns into performance, escalation, and talking past each other, representation is still there, but problem solving starts to break down. If disagreement isn't the problem, what is? So let's pinpoint what's actually going on, because this is where things shift. The problem isn't that Congress disagrees. The problem is that disagreement often turns into escalation, because in high-stakes environments with pressure cameras and constant scrutiny, our natural reactions tend to take over, talking over each other, reacting instead of listening, framing everything as a win or a loss. And when that happens, nothing moves forward. And when nothing moves forward, it doesn't just stay stuck. Decisions get delayed, problems build, and pressure doesn't disappear. It spills out somewhere else. So what we end up with isn't just disagreement, it's dysfunction. Not because people disagree, but because they can't move through disagreement. And that's not just about personality, that's about skill. So here's the distinction that changed how I see this. Conflict is not the problem. Unskilled conflict is. Because there's a difference between disagreement that leads somewhere and disagreement that just spins. And if you've ever had a conversation where you weren't totally listening, you were just waiting to respond, you already know what that feels like. Now multiply that across hundreds of people in a high-stakes environment with cameras on. That's what we're watching. We tend to think the issue is disagreement, but most of the time, the issue is how we handle it when it matters most. Hard to admit, right? Me too. Truth check. So if this is a skill problem, here's the part we don't usually stop to look at. Congress does have rules. There's decorum, expectations for how members behave in the room, procedures, rules for how decisions move forward, ethics guidelines, standards for what is allowed or not allowed in their role. There are even expectations about how members should behave. But those are rules. They're not skills. Rules can tell you when you can speak, how long you can speak, what you can and can't do within the rules. But they don't teach you how to listen, how to de-escalate, how to stay grounded when emotions rise, how to work through disagreement without turning it into an unproductive battle. And those are learned skills, not automatic ones. And in a lot of other areas where communication also really matters, people are actually trained to do this well. In business negotiations, in mediation, even in parts of the legal system, people are trained to slow down, to listen, to work through disagreement without escalating it, because the outcome depends on it. Here's the honest part. Most of us were never formally taught those things either. We pick them up or we don't. We model what we've seen or we don't. And sometimes we think we're communicating clearly when we're actually making things worse. We interrupt instead of listening. We react to tone instead of content. We assume intent instead of asking for clarity. So when we look at Congress and think, why can't they just handle this better? What we're really seeing is a system that expects high-stakes disagreement without consistently building the skills needed to handle it well. And that doesn't just stay inside Congress. It shapes more than we realize. And this is where it stops being just about Congress. What we see there doesn't just stay there. It moves through clips, through headlines, through the conversations we hear and repeat. And over time, not because we consciously copy it, but because repeated exposure quietly changes what feels normal, what we start to expect, even if we don't agree with it, how people argue, how people respond, what disagreement looks like. And once that shift happens, it shows up everywhere. Our conversations, our communities, even our families. But here's the part we don't always notice. When the most visible example of disagreement looks like escalation, it quietly becomes the example of what disagreement is supposed to look like. And if that's what we keep seeing, that's what starts to feel normal. But if instead disagreement looked like listening, clarifying, working through tension without attacking, that would shape us too. Because this isn't just a government issue, it's a human issue. Congress is just where it's most visible. But it doesn't stay there. When we see breakdown in Congress, we're not just seeing a political problem. We're seeing a human skill gap playing out on a national stage. Truth check. So here's what all of this adds up to, because this is the part that shifted things for me. If we want Congress to work better, we can't just focus on agreement. We have to look at how disagreement is handled. Because disagreement isn't going away. Our system is built so people from every walk of life are heard and represented. Disagreements not going away in Congress, not in this country, not in our lives. But the way we handle it, that can change. And this is the uncomfortable part. Because it's not just about them, it's about us too. Because the same skills that are missing there are the same ones we struggle with here. In conversations, in conflict, in moments where emotions rise. So maybe the starting point isn't how do we make them work together? Maybe it's what does it actually take to handle disagreement well? Because once we see that clearly, we're not just watching the problem anymore. We're starting to understand it. And once we start to understand it, we start to see it differently in real life. So here's what I'm curious about. When you think about disagreement, which is harder for you, listening or staying calm when you don't agree? Or have you ever seen a conversation where people did handle disagreement well? What made it different? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading. And as you're thinking about that, let's take it one step further. This week, pay attention to one disagreement you're part of, not to win it, just to notice it, because you can't change what you don't notice. Notice when you start reacting, notice when you stop listening, notice when things start to escalate, because awareness is where skill building starts. And how we show up in those moments is exactly what shapes the kind of conversations we have here. This channel isn't about censoring or forcing people to agree. It's about slowing down long enough to really listen, understand different perspectives, and approach discussions with thoughtful reflection together. I welcome different views, I really do, but respect matters here. If you disagree, explain why. If you see it differently, share your perspective. Here, our differences are strengths, and they're starting points for deeper understanding, not weapons. And if you'd like a little extra help shaping your reply, I've linked my 3 Ps in Action comment edition in the description. It's the same process I use myself to pause, pinpoint truth, and proceed with purposeful forethought. Don't worry about reading all this here. The full list of sources is in the description and on my site, american-together.com. I share them because checking sources matters just as much as checking headlines. So here's what all of this comes down to. If disagreement is something we're supposed to have, then the real question isn't how to avoid it. It's whether we know how to handle it. Systems don't function better just because we want them to. They function better when the people inside them have the skills to work through tension without tearing things apart. And that doesn't start in Congress. It starts with us, in how we listen, in how we respond, in whether we choose escalation or something more intentional. Because the way we handle disagreement doesn't just shape our conversations, it shapes what we come to expect and what we're willing to accept. And over time, that shapes what feels normal everywhere. If this made you pause and think, hit the thumbs up, share it with a friend, and join the conversation in the comments. Together, we're not just watching, we're building something. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Remember, pause, pinpoint truth, proceed with purposeful forethought. Join the conversation. See you next time.